just roughly speaking, bonds of similar risk characteristics, tax exempt, taxable, there will be a 30% difference in the interest rate, because that is the marginal rate, marginal tax rate, including state taxes for people who buy bonds.
Right. I guess my question comes in, and you may not be able to answer it. If we're looking at $1.5 million funding for a water line down East Street, if we went out and found a private investor or company that wanted to invest in that, does the nature of the project and the financing itself make it tax exempt
exempt
to those individuals?
Correct, yeah. And you could look at that option. If you do that, just be sure to give me a call and I'll help you with the interest rate. I have a county that a doctor was pretty clever in negotiating a real estate contract, and he has first right of refusal on the prepayment option. So he negotiated, I think, a 7% tax exempt rate. But what they did is they lowered selling price. So the county did save some money up front, but in hindsight, I look at it every year for him on whether it can be refinanced, and I called the doctor and he said, no way. So it's one of those, I think, in hindsight, they wish they would have they would have thought a little bit more about that option up front.
Have you seen examples of commercial private lending funding utility projects or other municipal projects?
Yes, working on one right now for City of Cashmere. It's with Treetop. And so we issued the bonds for the wastewater treatment facility to process the apple waste. Those bonds are issued as junior lien wastewater bonds. So they're in a second position to the city's water and sewer debt. Those bonds are secured not by the city, but by principal and interest payments from Treetop. And there's a contract that's pretty, the attorneys wrote up a pretty strong contract that says that if Treetop ever vacates the facility or sells it, they're still on the hook for that debt until it's paid off, or unless they sell it to someone of equal or higher corporate rating. And right now, they're in the process of trying to sell that facility. So, yeah, so that's
an example where you have, it's a public investment that's leveraged by private one company payments, and it's their rating that influences the interest rate. I'm asking, I go out and I want to expand my business, I'll go get commercial paper from a bank.
right.
I want to expand the sewer system. Can I go get commercial paper from a bank to do that?
Well, in theory, yes, but you're going to be paying a higher interest rate versus issuing a bond that's sold to the public,
Right.
to a group of investors and things.
Understood. And if I chose to do that anyway,
You could, yeah.
are there earnings that the bank makes tax exempt because they loaned it to the
Correct.
municipality? Yes.
That's
okay.
correct, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thanks for the clarification.
So, you might do a 20-year loan if the bank was willing. Nowadays, most of the banks are going short, and they want to keep it because of the risk and everything. So they'll say, okay, we'll finance you for 5 or 10 years, and then after that period, let's renegotiate. So then there's some interest risk exposure to the city. And then whenever you issue bonds, whether you're working with me or a bank, then you always want to involve your bond attorney. And they're going to look over all those documents. They're going to give an opinion that indeed you have followed all the correct steps to make sure that that's legal and binding. And that, then they'll give an opinion that the city has followed all the correct steps to make those bonds tax exempt. And as an aside, because there's some council members, you cannot purchase your own issues. So sorry about that. The question comes up a lot, but other city staff that aren't directly involved with the project can purchase,
What if they're
So the fine HR director can probably purchase some of her own bonds.
Any of them.
Yeah.
Yeah. What if they're rolled up in a mutual fund or something? You've got a mutual fund that's got muni bond investment, and they happen to buy some Washougal ones. You don't really know until you see the prospectus.
If you even look at it that
If
close.
you even look, yeah.
Oh, that would be okay, because then and then you're buying some of those mutual fund shares? Yeah, I think there's
even worse,
there's
you-
enough of an arm's length transaction, I think you'll be fine there. The typical buyers of bonds you'll find would be individual investors. We've advertised in your local newspaper before to encourage local investors, banks, insurance companies, mutual funds.
That's the one I'm thinking of.
Yeah. Page 9 just shows an example of analyzing a Build America bond versus a tax-exempt bond. And again, roughly, we're seeing that the Build America bond option, again, it's subject to market conditions, but potentially it could lower your average interest rate by 0.30%. Typically, the first 5 to 7 years, you'll find you'll have a tax-exempt portion, and then after that, you'll have what we call a taxable portion. And you can see the savings that occur at the crossover point. Now, if you're looking at just $1.5 million, most likely the Build America bond option will not pencil out for you because it has to do with size. But it's something that we can, if you're interested, we can certainly look at that for you. Again, on page 10, keep in mind about your financial policies and always be thinking about how you can sell the city to the rating analyst. It's a pretty interesting process. It's a fascinating time because Standard & Poor's has changed their philosophy. We saw it firsthand with the city of Edgewood back in 2006. It used to be always the concept or the philosophy that big is better, and cities like Tacoma and Pierce County would command higher rating grades. And all of a sudden in 2006, I got the phone call from Standard & Poor's, and the city of Edgewood received the same rating grade, AA-, as Pierce County and the city of Tacoma. And that was the start of this change in philosophy. Which is fantastic for cities of your size because we're seeing more upgrades. It's more efficient for the city, more cost effective. And again, it's a great public relations opportunity to let your community know how well you're managing the resources. Page 11 just talks about what makes revenue bonds more attractive to investors, meaning a lower interest rate and a higher grade. And not to belabor this, but again, striving for a debt service coverage of 2 times or higher, regularly updating your utility system rate study, formalizing financial policies, just keeping in mind about additional reserve funds, and maintaining a cash balance that would be equivalent to 6 months of your annual expenditures.
Tim, how important would you say out of these 11, if this is the exhaustive list of factors that are considered, would the items 6 and 7 be, particularly number 7?
Yeah, they're important. They definitely, if you're looking at a revenue bond, if your rate study is a few years old, you're going to have a lot more questions. There'll be a lot more questions of staff asking when will the next rate study occur. So you can still issue bonds and get a good rating without that.